Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Crossout Resurfaced. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Rainbow Arts, Crossout originally released for the Commodore 64 in 1989. Then in 1990 we would get the Amiga version, of which this remastered version is based off of. Now jump to February 2025, and Crossout Resurfaced is now available for the PC, the PlayStation 5, the Xbox, and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. Overall, we've had fun diving into this remaster. Although there are a couple frustrating elements when you initially start playing the game, once you get used to the systems, the unique shop mechanic and fleet mechanics the game has definitely make this one worth checking out. So it is a solid recommend from the chef. And with all that said, we find ourselves at the main menu. Before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about what's been added to the game itself. So you have new modes in addition to the new graphics and the sounds that have been updated for the game. We have the addition of this 2-player mode, which allows you to play in co-op. The original game was single player only, so that's a nice addition, and that is how we'll be showing this game off. There's also mirror mode that unlocks once you complete the game. This allows you to play the game with everything flipped, you go in the opposite direction. It's very mind-bending, so only take that one if you're looking for a challenge. Then we also have this trainer menu. The trainer menu has these basically cheats that you can turn on, and these become available after you've gotten a fair number of game overs. So if you're looking to unlock these, you can just game over a lot and you'll unlock them. We do have a couple turned on just so we can more easily show you the game systems. And then, before we actually start the game, one thing I do want to note, on the Nintendo Switch version, so the control scheme here, you can't actually change the controls, but you have this little display which shows you the controls. The trigger secondary weapon and the fire on A and B are swapped, so if you pick that one up, keep that in mind. I can't speak for the other console versions of whether or not they're correct, so just on the Switch version, know that that is incorrect. Starting the game, on the Switch version we do get to confirm our controllers, and then we're taken to the shop menu. This is arguably what makes Crossout such a great game. So initially when you start, we're taken to this screen here where we can choose our submarine, and there are several pre-built submarines that we can buy. However, you can skip past this and get straight to the shop like you would have in the original Amiga version. Here we have 4 submarines we can use as a base. So say we want to start with a Stingray, we can pick that. And we can either choose to customize this ourselves, or we can go to the prefabricator and pick more pre-builds. So for our purposes, to just show things off initially, I'll pick the Stingray 2. I could add on additional elements if I want, since we do have some extra money to use, but instead I'll just choose a second ship to use. So we'll go and take this squid here, and this one I'll customize a little bit myself. So if you're customizing it from scratch, what you would potentially be doing is buying a particular cannon for it, putting it on there, and then you can choose several different options. The base submarine will depend on how many different options you have. You can always go and have a missile equipped, and then say we want these charge shots on there, and also a couple different satellites, basically options that move around and help us do additional damage, added to the ship, and bam, there we go. Once all that's complete, once you've purchased all your ships and upgrades you want, you hit OK, and in the case of a 2-player game, it takes us to the second player's screen. Where here, the second player also has the same starting capital that we have, and they can choose to customize their ship however they would like. One thing to note is your ships basically act as your extra life. So if you have additional lives, then those ships will be like your extra lives, and if you lose one ship, then you move on to your next. It's kind of neat as you can go and build your own extra lives. And now we find ourselves in the world of Crossout. So initially, you're thrown right into the action. The game doesn't give you any pause to really get the feel of things. So this is a horizontal scroller where things feel pretty good as far as your movement's concerned. One thing to note, we do have the ability to change the sub speeds. You start at the middle speed, and you can use the bumps on your controller to go all the way up to a speed 4 or down to a speed 1. For me personally, I feel like 3 is perfect for most scenarios. There are a couple situations where you might want to be faster for a boss. So we have our primary shot, and firing our primary shot, You have the ability to have a rapid fire if you're using the trigger on the controller, the right trigger. However, if you have a charged weapon, you can charge that weapon up and fire it by using your fire button, in this case, the A. I don't believe either of us are equipped with that for this particular build, so that we don't have the chance to go and show that off. There are also drones that you can potentially have that you can either use and activate, or other special options and abilities like an invulnerability shield that like it will give you temporary invulnerability, or even like bombs. So there's a lot of option for customizing the subs to your gameplay once you've started to get enough credits to do so. How do you earn credits for upgrading your ship? That's accomplished by going through the stages, destroying the enemies and also the bosses, and getting bonuses therein, as your score is actually your money. So the number of credits you have is based off of how high your score is. So now we find ourselves at the first stage boss. So there are a couple of areas we need to destroy, and then once that's the case, then this like skull starts moving around, and we do have to be careful. So one of the things that's really frustrating about Crossout when you first start playing it is the size of your submarine's hitboxes and the terrain. If you're not careful, it's very, very easy to hit the terrain. Alright, so now that the boss is defeated, we get our stage clear, and you can see here we get additional credits for the stage and the bonus therein. That bonus increases for every stage you complete of the 8 total stages, and at the end, what you have left over is your final score for a run. After each stage, we're taken back to the shop, and here I can spend some money to go and either increase or buy additional subs or add extra options onto my existing subs. In addition, you can also change the order of your subs by grabbing one here and say I want to have this sub be further down the order and this sub be first, and I want this one to be a little bit stronger. So instead of just having the triple titanium shot, for example, I want to have the triple uranium shot equipped on it. And you can customize and increase your power through that method. And if you're playing in 2-player, the second player also has the ability to purchase additional upgrades for the ship, swap things around, and you can potentially even sell like the various items on your ship, and if you buy new ones, you can swap those around. So that's definitely helpful to have that functionality in there. Swapping the orders does also change the order that the ships that you'll be using when you start the stage. So if you do have a new design you want to be your primary ship, that is entirely possible. So, as I was mentioning, the collision is definitely a problem when you're first getting going with the game itself, and some of that is the first and the second stage's color scheme. So you have light green on dark green for the overall pattern. It makes it easy for the background to get lost in all the surrounding environment. And especially when without the extra, hull protection turned on, that's a one-hit kill. It can be pretty frustrating when you just get going into the first stage, you hit a wall and then suddenly it's game over. So that was one of the things that I was initially frustrated by the game itself. So that being the first unlockable trainer that you get is definitely not surprising. One thing that is nice though, that trainer doesn't disable the collision, it actually just reduces the damage that you take to about a quarter of what you would take otherwise. And that's basically Crossout served up for your enjoyment. So the basic cycle is you go through each of the 8 stages, defeating as many enemies as possible, getting all the credits that you can, upgrading your submarine or buying additional submarines to basically act as extra lives, and continuing to push through until you get to the end of the game. It's actually a pretty satisfying loop itself. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned, so the biggest thing I have with it is initially just getting used to the hit collision that the game itself goes and has. Once you're familiar with the size of the sub, which is actually decently, it basically is your entire hitbox, and the surrounding terrain, then the game does become easier. Though some stages and some of the challenges it throws at you are going to be just that, a challenge. Then it is a little bit on the shorter side as well, because even though there are 8 stages, the stages go pretty quickly. So here I'm just going to go and throw on an extra prefab, just so we have an extra life, just in case. And then the last thing is the bosses are a little underwhelming overall. So the gameplay itself, I feel, is pretty solid to experience as you're going through things. However, when you get to the final, the final parts of the stages, a lot of times the end bosses just don't feel like they're as interesting or even as effective as some of the mini bosses that we'll encounter throughout the course of a run. So of course, with this having some additional money, you are seeing a more powered up run than what you might have with that turned off. But you can still build yourself up to about this point pretty easily if you're not losing extra subs playing through the stages themselves. But as far as the plus flavors are concerned, the things that I definitely feel make this game worth it, that whole shipbuilding mechanic with the shop is something that's a lot of fun. There's a lot of options you can experiment with. So if you want to build one that's really heavily focused on having powerful satellites, or if you want these like extra drones that you can put in front of you to just shoot the enemy and like make this mini boss here, for example, like just a piece of cake to take out, you can. And that's really fun to have that kind of flexibility with the gameplay that's like present here. And just the thought that you're building up an entire fleet of ships to use against the enemy, it's just like a really like satisfying experience to have numerous ships that not only have you like purchased, but you also designed as well, potentially. So like that's what I feel makes Crossout a standout. And really the last plus flavor, as far as taking a classic and updating it for modern systems, I feel they did a knockout job with this one. It controls great, the engine handles beautifully, even like playing with 2-player and all the shots and enemies and everything that you have on screen, it never misses a beat. This is really a great remaster. There's a minor issue with some like sound balancing, but just turning down the sound effects definitely help with that, so it's not too big of a deal. And with that said, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. Once again, Crossout, definitely a solid recommend to try out from the chef. As always, we want to thank you so much for joining us this week. We hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.